President Joe Biden meets with world leaders, announcing new sanctions against Russia and more help for Ukraine as the war reaches the 1-month mark.
This legislation aims to save Coloradans' lives. Fentanyl is unlike any drug we've seen before, and we need to treat it differently.
Colorado lawmakers are taking steps to address the state's fentanyl crisis.
Drug use that I've been seeing over, it's just gotten worse and worse.
Crime and drugs are plaguing Denver's Union Station. Now RTD is making changes to try to keep the public safe.
We have a very fine line in which we need to walk because we're not trying to penalize people.
Plus, alternative meats are finding their way into your pet's food. Happening now, state lawmakers are trying to address Colorado's fentanyl crisis. More than 1,600 people died from drug overdoses in Colorado last year. Nearly half of those deaths involved fentanyl. Denver 7's Veronica Acosta is in studio this morning to explain the new legislation being unveiled right now. Veronica, what have they said so far?
Well, it is all about punishing those fentanyl dealers, not fentanyl users. That's really the goal of this bill. State lawmakers, they gathered this morning to announce it. And here's what they're going to say, or what they're saying, rather, it's going to include. Tougher penalties for people selling fentanyl. It'll require those arrested for having fentanyl to undergo mandatory treatment. The state health department will also get $20 million to buy naloxone, which can reverse the effects of an overdose, buy test strips, and even help pay for jail-based treatment. Listen to what leaders had to say this morning.
This bill gives law enforcement and the prosecutors the tools they need to put dangerous fentanyl dealers behind bars. Low-level dealers, mid-level dealers, and high-level dealers. All are contributing to this crisis that we're seeing throughout our communities. They will face stiff consequences. Distribution that leads to death will be a level 1 drug felony.
And this bill has gotten pushback from Republicans. They say it doesn't include harsher punishments for people caught with fentanyl. Some Republicans have blamed the rise of fentanyl deaths on a 2019 law that downgraded the charges for small amounts of most drugs to a misdemeanor. Here's what addiction and criminal legal experts believe. They say dealers who are put in jail will simply be replaced by someone else. They don't think harsher penalties for fentanyl dealers will cut the numbers of deaths. Law enforcement associations, they also weighed in. In a statement, they said in part, quote, "We must reestablish firm criminal consequences for dealing and possessing deadly amounts of this dangerous drug. The bill's provisions can and should do more." And of course, we're going to have more on this legislation tonight at 4 and then again at 5.
It is a long bill, and we'll be breaking down as much of it as we can. Our Veronica Acosta this morning. Thank you. All right, well, to other news now. Today marks 1 month since the war in Ukraine began, and President Joe Biden and world leaders are showing a united front against Russia. The president is announcing more sanctions against Russia and more aid for Ukraine. As Elizabeth Schulze reports, with Biden in Europe, NATO leaders heard a strong message from Ukraine's president.
As Russia's war on Ukraine enters its 2nd month, President Biden is on the world stage, meeting with key U.S. allies. At emergency summits with NATO and G7 leaders in Brussels, Biden announcing a new set of sanctions targeting Russian elites, members of parliament, defense firms, and the country's central bank. President Biden also says the U.S. will provide an additional $1 billion in humanitarian aid and take up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, though the White House hasn't laid out how yet. The UN reports more than 3.6 million people have fled Ukraine since the war began, and half of all the children in the country have now been displaced. In an address to NATO leaders, Ukrainian President Zelensky once again begging for more military help and accusing the West of not doing enough to help his democratic country.
NATO has yet to show what the alliance can do to save people, to show that this is truly the most powerful defense union in the world.
His plea for help comes as Ukrainian forces continue their relentless defense of key cities. U.S. defense officials say the Russian military east of Kyiv has been pushed back to 34 miles outside of the capital. And to the north, the Russians are now in defensive positions. NATO's Secretary General warns Russia could resort to using chemical weapons as a pretext to escalate its attacks.
Any use of chemical weapons will totally change the nature of the conflict.
President Biden is set to hold a press conference from Brussels today after another high-stakes meeting with European leaders. Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
Ukraine's government says some cities are running out of food and medical supplies, and a Colorado group is trying to help by sending supplies to the country. Marina Dubrova immigrated to the U.S. from Ukraine in the 90s. Since then, she's been part of the group Ukrainians of Colorado. Marina tells us when Russia attacked Ukraine, she wanted to do something to help.
It's unimaginable situation some of our brothers and sisters are going through. Russians cut the supply, humanitarian supply. They refused to open humanitarian corridors.
Volunteers from Ukrainians of Colorado are packing medical supplies today at the Project Cure headquarters in Centennial from 12:45 to 3. They will also pack supplies from 9:45 to noon and 12:45 to 3 tomorrow. You can sign up to help. We have a link on thedenverchannel.com. The U.S. will accept up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, and Governor Jared Polis says they will be welcome here in Colorado. President Joe Biden is expected to release more details during his time in Europe. The UN says more than 3 million people have fled Ukraine. Most of them have crossed into Poland, which officials say is the fastest displacement crisis since World War II. The war in Ukraine is having an impact on the world economy as well. Forecasts for global growth have been slashed, and economists say the chance of a U.S. recession happening next year has risen to 35%. Sanctions and supply chain disruptions have been sending consumer prices soaring really across the world. The French government calls the problem a worldwide food crisis and is considering vouchers to help middle and low-income families afford food. Police Chief Vanessa Wilson plans to resign from the Aurora Police Department. Sources tell Denver 7 Investigates that there's been pressure for her to resign because she's lost the confidence of her officers. Wilson became interim chief in 2019. The department has been through a difficult time in the past few years, including the death of Elijah McClain, a drunk driving scandal involving an officer, and officers detaining and handcuffing a black woman and her children because officers thought they were in a stolen vehicle. The department has also seen a record number of officers leave the department, and the union passed a no confidence vote in Wilson back in October. Now, Wilson is expected to resign in the next few weeks. We reached out to the city for comment. The city told us it would not engage in, quote, speculative conversations on any personnel matter. Now, we expect this story to develop throughout the day. We'll stay on top of it and bring you anything we learn both on air and on thedenverchannel.com. RTD is making safety changes to the terminal at Union Station. It's because the terminal has seen a rise in crime, drug use, and drug dealing. One of the biggest changes you'll see are turnstile gates, so only people with tickets will have access to the concourse of the bus terminal. Those will be installed in the next year. TV monitors with security cameras will be installed within the next 6 months to a year. RTD says all these things are designed to keep the public safe.
It's something that I'm committed to trying to do the best that I can to try and ensure that we're providing an environment where our employees or our customers don't have to look over their shoulders.
Other changes will roll out in the next 6 months, including better lighting, public safety announcements, and covering electrical outlets. Well, Boulder County is starting round 2 of its curbside pickup program for homes that weren't destroyed in the Marshall Fire. The county will pick up wind and fire damaged items like appliances, electronics, and construction materials. Crews will not pick up trash or any fire debris. Colorado will be getting money from the federal government for wildfire recovery efforts. It comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. $3 billion will be distributed to Colorado and other states, including California and Texas. The Denver School Board is voting this afternoon on changes for innovation schools. Those are schools that design their own instruction with input from teachers, parents, and the community. The board says the changes are called executive limitations. Those changes will ensure teachers have job rights and protections. Some innovation schools, though, are concerned their customized teaching methods will be taken away, saying their model is successful.
The innovation plans that we have in our schools, they've been approved by teachers, they've been approved by staff, they've been approved by parents, by the community. So it's still an attempt to undo our flexibilities that we have in the innovation schools.
This afternoon's meeting starts at 4:30. DPS says it won't be able to have in-person attendance, so the board will vote virtually. You can find a link to the meeting on our website, thedenverchannel.com. A Colorado House committee will discuss a bill today that would return schools to accountability measures that were suspended during the pandemic. The legislation would basically require the State Department of Education to get back to targets and standards that were in place in 2018 and 2019. If districts put improvement plans in place, the bill would also allow them to be eligible for grants. The proposal has already passed in the Senate. Nuggets head coach Michael Malone is sticking around. The team gave him a contract extension yesterday. Malone has 309 wins, which is third most in Nuggets history. He'll go for win number 310 tonight against the Suns. The DU men's hockey team starts its quest to win a national championship tonight. The Pios are the #1 seed in the NCAA West Regional. They play UMass Lowell at 7 tonight at the Budweiser Event Center in Loveland. The winner advances to play the winner of the Minnesota Duluth Michigan Tech game. And speaking of brackets, you still have time to vote in our Best of Colorado Things to Do bracket. We are down now to the final four. Brewery hopping, hiking a 14er, a concert at Red Rocks, and camping at Rocky Mountain National Park. Those are your 4 finalists. Round 3 voting runs today. Right now, it's open all the way through Monday. Head on over to thedenverchannel.com/bracket to vote. Coming up, Waterworld wants to hire hundreds of workers before opening for the season. And a Colorado company is changing pet food, and it's made with the environment in mind.